ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the next session of Sustainable Future Food Experts. Today we have the session on best practices for food distribution, joined by some eminent experts from the industry. Uh, I would like to introduce the moderator for the session, Mr. Raj Sharma, who's the international business consultant. He has had a distinguished career in the FMCG industry with stints in Unilever and Nestle. He retired a couple of years ago from Nestle, where he was the head of exports and a part of the management committee as well. With his tremendous experience in procurement, manufacturing, supply chain, and other functions, he has been able to mentor a lot of startups, helping them build the brand development, communication strategy, both in India and in international markets. Mr. Raj is presently working as a country manager with Global Appetite, which is a Canadian-based company, and he's helping them develop their international business. It's a pleasure to have you, Mr. Raj, and I would hand over the mic now to Mr. Raj to take it further and introduce the panelists.
Thank you, Aryan. Good evening, all those who have joined, but also good morning to our friends from US and Canada, and it could be good afternoon to some of the other viewers, depending on what time of the day you are joining from your part of the world. Let's dive straight away into the session. We've had a couple of sessions in this series. We talked about compliance and regulations on both product and packaging. And in a subsequent session, we talked about product development. And quite logically, our session now today has to be about distribution. And we want to discuss the best practices in distribution of food, because that's the one product or industry that binds all of us who are here today. As Arihan said, we have a very distinguished panel. It gives me great pleasure to have Neil Soni, who is President and CEO of House of Spices. It's a specialty food organization focusing on distribution, manufacturing, and brand management. House of Spices has, I think, at least 17 distribution centers and lots of trucks, maybe more than 60 throughout North America. Neil leverages his company's resources to achieve the highest level of consumer satisfaction for their range of portfolio food products. So House of Spices was actually set up nearly 50 years ago by his father, and I've had the pleasure of knowing his father for, I think it was about 40 years ago that I got to know him. His going away a couple of years ago was a big loss, both to the industry and of course a personal loss to me as well, a dear friend having been lost. Neil himself has been with the family business for nearly 20 years, and he now has tremendous experience. He, of course, as he says, he has experienced all responsibilities from cleaning bathrooms to making deliveries to leading a 200-person team. Neil is a graduate from Boston University and has also attended Bronx High School of Science. We also have Kendall Miller from Global Appetite. Kendall has 34 years experience in FMCG business. He joined Global Appetite in 2012 and is currently the Vice President Sales. Prior to that, he spent 3 years at Pinnacle Foods as Director of Business Development and 20 years at Kraft Foods Canada in progressive roles from sales rep to director level. Kendall has extensive experience leading complex changes and turnaround strategies across multiple product categories and national cross-functional brand teams. Global Appetite, in case any of you are not aware, is a company that is sourcing products from over 15 countries and is supported by some 35 distributors across North America, mainly Canada, but also some presence in USA. And some of the brands that they represent include Maggi, Milo, Arizona, Bali, Dole, Roundtree, and Mota. Our third panelist today is Vivek Chandra. Uh, I must say, Vivek is somebody I've known now for, I don't know, 50 years. Um, Vivek is CEO of global branded business for LT Foods. Prior to LT Foods, he was the regional president and CEO for South Asia and ASEAN for British Foods major, Associated British Foods. He has also led Pennzoil Quaker State in South Asia as its MD and CEO. Vivek is an alumnus of modern schools in Stephens College, IIM Calcutta, and the Delhi School of Economics. He has a distinguished corporate career over 35 years with leading MNCs, and he started his career with Procter & Gamble. He was responsible for launch and growth of iconic brands like Ariel, Pantene, Twinings, and Dawat. Dawat is something that he has developed over the last few years. In fact, he's been with LT Foods for the last 10 years and has led its emergence as one of the fastest growing and largest branded basmati rice company in the world, and has driven its transformation into a consumer food company with the launch of a portfolio of ready to eat and ready to consume, ready to cook products. So welcome all of you. Arihant, if you would just, yeah, spotlight all the panelists. Great. So let me move straight away to the topic of the day. From my experience, clearly, I mean, you could make a good product, you could price it well, your packaging could be good, but if it is not distributed properly, if the whole supply chain doesn't work in the right manner, we could have failures. And there have been umpteen number of such examples in the food industry. So I'm going to dive straight away into my lead question, which is what, to your mind, would be the top 5 or 6 or 10, whatever number you want to give, best practices to be followed in distribution management? And perhaps I can start with you, Neil. I mean, you have handled various aspects of the business. Also spices manufactures, it also imports, but of course has a huge distribution set up throughout North America. So what are the best practices your organization follows in distribution management?
Mr. Sharma, thank you for your time today, and thank you for those kind words. Overall, I think today in distribution and supply chain, it is the most dynamic time I've experienced in my career. Variables that no one else in the world has ever seen. And on the best practices, I believe that every company has to be true to itself. For what do they actually want to achieve? What are their goals? What are they forecasting? And then align themselves with the capabilities to ensure that they can reach these forecasts and these aspirations. So the number one aspect you have to do is, one, align your team. For what do we all want to achieve together? And what are the sacrifices and the agenda points we all have to do together to achieve that?
Mm-hmm.
2, understanding your suppliers, understanding your partners. How fast are they willing to grow with you? Or how slow do they want to go? And then understand who your true supplier should be, and then decide which direction you want to go in to align your company with your customers and your suppliers. But today, I would say that the best practices, that the company's trying to achieve is, 1, truck drivers and logistics on our end in America is the hardest asset to find. So our company is building up capacity tremendously. So we're trying to hire as many truck drivers as possible and operations teams in order to achieve the objectives that the company has. And 3, warehouse space.
Mm-hmm.
In order to grow your company, in order to manage this supply chain that we're dealing with, you must have ample warehouse space with proper loading docks and a proper supply chain team that can handle these logistical concerns that we're having at the moment.
No, I think, yeah, carry on.
And you always have to know what the customers want.
Absolutely.
You have, in order,
I
you
think
have to know.
you have a huge territory to cover. I mean, USA, of course. And as luck would have it, your customers are, I think, based all over USA. So it's not as if they are concentrated in certain pockets. Yes, there is a little bigger focus in some areas, but I think it's quite a challenge for you to reach various ends. But let me just ask you before I move on to the others. Um, how did the pandemic change the dynamics of distribution? I mean, we saw here in India that less people were going actually into the shops or supermarkets and depending more and more on online shopping. Was that
Mhm.
something that you saw in your part of the world as well?
Yeah, so I would say during the pandemic, the sales on our online platforms went up by 700%. But
Oh,
after the vaccine came out, I would say by January, February 2021, sales have come a little bit higher than 2019, but they've come down tremendously since the online people are going to stores and shopping. What we have seen is the stores that are able to do fast deliveries to consumers. So our business that is with Instacart, that is with Amazon, is growing tremendously because they're able to take orders from customers on their phone and get a delivery within 2 hours. So, but we deal with the South Asian community, and just to be very honest, our South Asian community, they like to feel the vegetables when they go to the store, and that's still 50% of the shopping. So that customer base still is very geared in that direction.
yeah, I can understand. Kendall, you have, of course, years and years of experience of being in sales and distribution.
Correct.
What would you tell? I would say a lot of the youngsters who are on this, who are the target audience for this.
Right.
How would
You
you
know,
guide the young startups or food companies how to handle this?
sure. I mean, first off, thank you for having me. I'm very honored to be on this panel with the two distinguished gentlemen that are included. I wish we were able to do something like this in person, to be in front of an audience. And I hope everyone who is watching is, staying safe and healthy, and your families are safe and healthy through these very challenging times. I know it's been difficult for many. To answer your question in regards to the best practices from, I would look at it more from a broker perspective, because that's kind of what we represent in this. There are a couple of key things that we would look at, for us, and Neil touched on them a little bit, is lead times. Adequate lead times. As we know, through COVID, things have changed a lot, and we've seen basically supply chain be very much constrained. We've seen consumers change some of their buying habits. Neil spoke to it a little bit. E-commerce, again, has exploded here in Canada as well. And the question here becomes, will that continue, or will that revert back to maybe previous levels? But we've seen a lot of pantry loading too, especially early days in COVID. There was a lot of empty shelves in the stores as people loaded up on hard goods and things that they felt they needed to take them through. Like if you think of how they shop during a snowstorm, people will buy everything off the shelf, water, whatever. So, that having adequate inventory and being able to supply that is hugely important. From our standpoint, communication is critical, making sure that the distributors that we work with have great communication internally up and down through their chain. When we launch new products, I want to make sure that the sales team with the distributors that we work with have adequate training to be able to sell those new products into their retail outlets. And finally, the last thing would be for us, it's not last but not least, is systems, making sure that there's adequate systems in place to be able to do sales reporting back through to us. Also understanding points of distribution, where our products are being sold, and being able to monitor those sales and what things we might be able to do to influence those sales if they're either doing really well and learning from that, or lagging, and some tactics we may have to put in place to support that.
And I think you have hit on a very important part that systems, an extremely important part of good supply chain. Uh, Tell me, area-wise, of course, as we know, Canada is even bigger than US, but has a population 110. So your challenges in terms of reaching the population, are they to that extent higher? And what has been your experience? I mean, you're right that the online shopping has been a temporary surge, as Neil also said, a 700% surge at one time, and then it has petered down.
Yeah,
But I would say that the new normal is that you will see a combination of the two anyway.
sure you
Uh,
will.
so, what is your take on that?
In regards to the behavior moving forward of the consumer?
Yeah, to the fact that there will be some people who will, of course, go back to the stores whenever they get the opportunity because of, as he says, the touch and feel,
Yeah.
which is important. Uh, and there would be some who would, perhaps in certain circumstances, which could be anything, it could be because you have a lot of snow in your area or torrential rain or whatever, I don't know. I mean, there would be some situations or a different kind of a little, endemic situation, or just pure laziness to sit at home and get your groceries.
My belief, and based on things that I've read, is that this is not just a trend, it's going to be a behavioral change for consumers. How many continue to do that? I don't know, but I do expect to see online continue to grow. The online platforms continue to increase. You're seeing grocery retailers in Canada layer on and add in home delivery. Loblaws basically have different ways for consumers to buy product and not have to enter their store, be it delivered to home. They have different areas that are set aside where you can actually order your product online and pick it up, in some cases right in subway stations, so that you pick it up on your way home to make it more convenient for you. Neil's right, though. There's still going to be that consumer that wants the brick and mortar experience. And in Canada, the population continues to age. So there's still going to be that core group of people that will go into grocery stores and still want to, touch and feel their products.
Hmm. Vivek, you have now been, as I said, associated with the food industry for nearly 20 years.
Right.
And I think as the CEO of the LT Foods global business, you have sort of guided the company to newer heights. What has been your experience on the changing pattern, and what practices have you followed with your business partners?
Right. First of all, Raj, let me start by thanking you for that wonderful introduction. And really glad to be part of a panel which is so distinguished. Happy to be talking about this. Kendall and Neil both touched upon this, that while the pandemic did throw up, especially online shopping, as a big behavior change, it's all going to settle down at a certain level. Now, prior to the pandemic, online shopping for grocery business globally accounted for maybe 4 to 5% of the total grocery sale, jumped to close to about, I think, 19%. And most people are saying it's going to settle down at about 12 to 14. So it's kind of, in 2 years, we've got what the industry itself would have got in 10 years of growth. But the fact is that, it is only going to be in the, call it 15 to 20 range. And the other channels will continue to be important. So what we actually discovered during the pandemic was that companies like us, and those much better and bigger than us, they benefited from following certain best practices as a way of doing work. And they were able to take advantage by scaling up or dialing up what was important at that point in time. So I think it's important really just to talk of top practices in general, because they hold you in good stead regardless of what the situation is that you're holding. And I really want to start with one of the philosophies that I have had. And I mean, as you know, I've led the P&G sales organizations in Asia. And I always believe that the top sales organizations service demand which they created in the last order or in the last call, and use this call to create demand for the future. Now, everything, therefore, all the best practices that we talk of should be geared to this sort of belief. And really, I would put them into three sort of buckets. One is about effectivity in reach and distribution. The second is about cost and resources, efficiency. And the third is about business development. Let me touch upon each of these. The first, which I'm saying about effective reach and service practices. The key objective of any distribution is to really make product available where it'll be purchased. And we spoke about e-com is where it's being purchased. Whatever it is that you might have, a mom and pop store, or you might have a small square footage self-service store, but there will be a pretty predominant small stores environment. And then you have the environment of the large formats and the hypermarkets. And lastly, in food, HoReCa, very important channel.
Oh, yeah.
Now, the key point really is that the competencies and the mindsets that are needed to sell to service each of these four are different. So the best practice really is for distribution management is to create those organizations. If you want to be a cross-channel player, if you don't want to be, then the channels you are on, you need to create the organizations and the competencies who can do that. The second, which I spoke about, is the ability to deliver to these channels most cost effectively. And really, this brings in the whole mix of customers and the mix of brands, what to push, because we need to be talking about net earnings per channel, per reach, and to maximize productivity and efficiency. And so planning in this way and thinking about like this needs a trained organizations who can do this. And so this logically brings me to this third aspect in the best practice, which is about analytics and data management. There used to be a time when we used to say, think global and act local. Now the whole axiom is changed to plan central, execute local. This is really all about getting the real-time data for the selling organizations that comes into a central place where you really churn that whole data around and you're able to guide the person on the field what to do. So the field does not think, the field executes. The center thinks using all the analytical tools, which of course brings us to digitization. And the best practices there are about organizations having a digital vision and a digital strategy. Last 2 points really quickly I want to talk about. One is value addition. The question we typically ask is that if this function ceased to exist, what is it that the company will miss? And if the answer is selling and distribution, then really we're not doing much value addition. So the real piece here is how do the organizations create more demand than what central programs would do? How do we value add? How do we create practices which become industry standards? Because that then is sustaining competitive advantage. And of course, the last point, which is that today in food, consumers are really getting fussed about traceability, sustainability, social responsibility. And delivering this is really a end-to-end, it's not just one part of the chain. It's the brand owner, it's the logistics provider, it's the distributor. Everybody has to do their part. But ESG really comes from an operating belief. It is not about reporting. It's not about telling investors. It's really about what you do. So I think these really are the sort of sustaining best practices in distribution management.
And I think that's a good point you brought about ESG. And of course, I mean, you said people want sustainability and traceability. And of course, the pandemic has made everybody more conscious of food safety, of nutrition, of building immunity. So those are the kind of choices. I think it's interesting the kind of changes that have come about as a result of the pandemic. Although my intention was not to focus so much on that, and as we are all coming out of it, but it is true that digitization and using technology is going to be something that will have to be done more and more in the future uh, for the
If I can make
benefit of yeah, go ahead.
Mr. Sharma, from House of Spices side. So we're dealing with 2,500 retail customers, mom and pop stores. We deal with the Costco's, the BJ's, the big box, and they use EDI, but the mom and pops place their orders over phone or fax or sometimes an email. And then we deal with 1,000 restaurants. We've launched a B2B app where the retailers place their order online. And there was a lot of resistance. No one knew what the potential was, what the opportunity was, thinking that we're still in this trade. We're shocked to see that now we're going to start receiving 20 to 25% of our orders online through the app.
That's yeah. I think
It's
that's
going
very
exactly
good. Yeah.
what Vivek ji said and what Kendall has said. People want to pay for convenience. There's no price for convenience. So just as people order online and the food's delivered to them, same thing is going to happen on a B2B side.
No, I was expecting that. I mean, I was going to come to that technology and the ordering process using technology. So good that you brought in. Let me just mention one thing to you. Vivek definitely knows about it. Perhaps Neil, you have also, because you are clued on to what happens in India. But for Kendall's benefit, one of the largest industrial groups in India, Tata, have bought into a few online shopping apps. Not only do they have one called Big Basket, which is the grocery shopping, they've got, and including fresh produce. They have bought into one which is doing basically the health related things, medicines, the pharmacy, the lab tests, doctors consultations, something called Tata 1mg now. And then they also have another app based shopping which has to do with garments and those kind of personal products, etc. So they've really tried to cover a lot of the home shopping through these acquisition or setting up of some of these apps. So people are reacting to the changes that have come about, and as you can see that there was a time where actually medicines and pharmacy were even more important than getting your grocery, when the pandemic was there. Anyway, so let me move on to another area. uh, you know what distribution partners you appoint is, uh, or rather than my putting a leading question, what do you think is the importance of getting the right distribution partner, and what are the fundamental principles that you follow in appointing a partner? Um, I think Neil, definitely you have a choice because there are people who may want to be associated with the House of Spices. Kendall's experience may be a little different because Global Appetite is well, now it's not a fledgling company, but it has had to find its feet over the last few years. So, Neil, what principles do you follow to appoint a distribution partner?
So are you meaning suppliers?
No, the ones who then distribute your product onwards. I mean, I know that you have a distribution setup of your own, but I'm sure you'd also have some sub distributors or in areas where
So,
your own trucks don't reach.
so around the country, we deal directly with all the end customers. So we distribute to everyone directly. Only, I would say, example of this is that we have two brands that we then distribute to parties in the UK and Europe, and we deal with parties in Australia as well. And, you know, I've never thought about that, but I'd say for these partners, it's always been based on transparency, on having open discussions on how we can increase distribution, on being very clear on what is our responsibility as the brand owner and what are their responsibilities as a distributor. And then what are the expectations we all have with each other and how much we can supply and how much they can sell. And then what is the end goal after 5 to 10 years for this brand?
Good. Kendall, what about you?
It's a great question, Raj, because, best case scenario, our distributors are our business partners. And at the very least, they provide a valuable service, which is they get our goods to the customer and then through to the consumer. I would say there's a number of variables we look at. We have about 35 different distributors in Canada, as you talked about in the opening, that we deal with. And when it comes for us to appoint a distributor, there's a number of things that we look for. Neil touched on one, which is planning. It's very important for us to be able to plan with our distributors, the business for current year and moving forward. But the biggest thing for us is first and foremost is coverage. And Neil and I were talking about this before we got online. Having an understanding of where that distributor can sell our goods. You talked about Canada earlier being a very large country, and typically we have more regional distributors than we do national distributors. So, where do they have reach in regards to the regions that they work in? Do they have the ability to also, get into the independent channels? Because a lot of the business that we do at Global Appetite, when I first joined the company, about 80% of the sales were being done in the independent channel. So it's very important that our distributor is able to source into the independent channel, not just be able to deliver to, the large grocery retailers or the drug channel. So that's very important for us as well. Warehouse facilities, understanding where they are. How many trucks do they have? Neil talked about 50, I believe it's 50 trucks across the USA. How many sales reps do you have that can provide that coverage? So that's one piece. Another important piece for us to understand is where do they have vendor of record status? Are you a vendor at, Loblaws, which is our largest grocery retailer in Canada? Do you have vendor of record status at a number of these retailers? Because recently retailers seem less enamored in adding more vendors. They want to kind of keep with the core group that they have. So having vendor of record status is important for us to be able to appoint a distributor. Do they have direct to store capabilities? Because back to the independent piece, a lot of those sales are done DSD, direct to store, versus just putting product into a customer warehouse. Do they have a track record of good performance? We need to do credit checks as it relates to, their ability to pay on time, because that's very important to our clients. And then finally, we touched about it in the previous question, was just inventory management and sales reporting. Do they have the capabilities from a technical standpoint to be able to work with us and help us understand where we're selling our products and how well we're selling them?
Yeah. Vivek, what about you? You would have appointed some distributors in various parts of the world.
That's true.
In your case, it would have been maybe a little different. I mean, those would be what importers come distributors, or importers who then work with distributors.
I mean, as you know, in India we had about 700 distributors. LT Foods has 400 distributors in India. But I've worked with national distributors, whether it was Philippines or Indonesia. We today sell in 70 countries, and distributors, the distributor partners, as Kendall was mentioning, that is how we go to market. That's how we go to these countries, and that's how we sell. So these partners are the face of the company there. And apart from the fact that, they are able to distribute our products, the distributor partners give us the power of the aggregation of their total portfolio. So they can reach more, they can do more than what we alone can achieve. And since they are local, they're based in that country, they bring in the knowledge of the channels, the knowledge of the customers, they bring in also knowledge of consumers and the trends that are going to be coming in. So the distributor partners really is how we go to market. And what do we look for? As I think the key things that they have to do for us is to execute our distribution strategies, to execute our sales strategies. They have to deliver customer service. As Kendall was mentioning, the ability to service orders wherever they are. Then for the bigger accounts, they have to deliver the conceptual sales. They have to create jointly and deliver JBPs with the big guys. And of course, they have to finance the credit, finance the reach. But the first thing that we look for when we appoint a distributor is what is the philosophy? What's the business philosophy? Because money, a lot of distributors can bring in, but if you don't have the right attitudinal match, that is a marriage made in hell, not in heaven. So you've got to first look for, are we aligned in the way we think about business, the way we think about life, the way we think about the bigger pieces in life. Second, then, is to align on the vision. You can't go to a distributor who is now wanting to consolidate and make more money when your goal is to grow aggressively. So what is their business vision? What's your business requirement? Do they fit? So these fitments, which we call cultural or whatever, are important. Then is to get a good sense of their infrastructure. Like Kendall was saying, like Neil was saying, how many trucks, what warehouses, how many salesmen. So it is one thing for these people to be talking about the vision. The infrastructure and what they do with it really tells you what truly is what their vision, what in the P&L matters to them. Only now do I go and look for, do you have the money to fund current business and the growth? So that's the money for me, comes in only now. And lastly, we check, what is the contribution of our business to their business. It shouldn't be too small, then you won't get the time of the day. And it shouldn't be too large, because then you are basically running the load of their entire business. So that's really what we look for when we are looking for business partners.
I think you mentioned that they are the face of our company. I used to use some other body parts. I used to say you are our extended arm, and you are also our eyes and ears in the market, because that's how, because we can't be there all the time. So any information about what is happening in the market, so you have to be our eyes and ears and pass on that information. So
That's true.
I think that's an important aspect. And yes, their way of thinking, their vision has to be in sync with ours. So I think those are all good points. So in recent times, and this is perhaps more relevant for those who are in imports, like you, Neil, or Kendall. There has been some increase in freight costs, and availability of containers went down during the last 1 year. How have you handled that, or are you planning on? I know that, Neil, you've been having this global tie-up with some shipping lines, etc. How have you handled this, and do you have some kind of long-term contracts? Are they been beneficial?
Let's just say it used to be my first phone call was to my sales team in the morning. And now the first 4 hours of my day are on supply chain. So the situation is extremely delicate, and it'll go in, I would say, 3 parts, which are the issues at hand. And the first part will be getting boxes out of India or wherever you source around the world, and ensuring you have the capacity to do so. So it's very important for any company to ensure you clearly know exactly what you need, not for the next month, but for the next 3 to 4 months.
Exactly, yeah.
And then focus mostly on what is going to be your slowest obstacle, the slowest piece, and that'll be the movement of containers, not of the production of the merchandise. So understanding what your capacity is, and then how do you start finding that capacity? Number 2, it's going to be on importing side, do you have the trucking capacity that would be able to pick up these containers from the shipping yards, which is also another logistical issue at this time. So lining up that trucking, and then 3, do you have the distribution network and the trucks available to make these sales? It's not only containers.
Yeah.
The micro side of delivering the end product to stores is much harder today than it has been ever in my life. And sending this merchandise directly to stores is harder than getting containers out of any country you want to. So this is hitting all sides of the coin. And I think time will tell, but it's going to be a business of growing your scale, growing and having resources, and ensuring that you make the right investments in order to have this merchandise and inventory to put in the stores.
I think we had a very peculiar situation in UK recently where they ran out of fuel and they didn't know where to get the trucks from to move cargo within, and of course also coming in from European Union. Kendall, I know you are more involved in the distribution part and perhaps less in the import in containers, but certainly you are dependent on the supplies reaching on time. So what has been your recent experience on this? And
We do a fair amount of importing through our Nestle through Nestle. I think Neil answered that question like perfectly, which is ultimately you need to have the resources to be able to get your product to market. You cannot be dependent on one freight forwarder. You need multiple options to get your product there. We know there's challenges with freight and freight costs. I mean, depending on the route, we've seen it go from 3 to 5 times a variable in regards to the increases from different markets that we import from. I think, to answer your earlier question, the long-term contract could help you in the short term, maybe to fix your costs related to your freight, but still to get end to end to the consumer, we're still going to be challenged. And so from our standpoint, we just try to be as forward looking as possible to get inventory. We got a current challenge right now with some inventory trying to get it out of Japan and looking at multiple carriers, et cetera, as a way to get it in the most efficient manner. So I'm repeating myself, but having multiple options to get it to your country, the destination country, and really just being as flexible as possible in regards to who you're dealing with.
Vivek, I know you have to go for another meeting, so I'm going to quickly read out a question that has come on the chat.
Sure.
Jason has said, "Hey guys, great session. I feel it makes more sense to import high value products now. Are you passing the extra cost now in carrying on the cheaper products to the retailers, or facing backlash in terms of increasing PTR, price to retailer?" I don't know if you want to go first, Vivek.
Yeah, sure. There is a genuine cost increase. Kendall was just talking about how freight has gone up 3 to 5 times. And Kendall would know this, Neil would know this. None of us increase the cost straight away, the price to retailer and therefore the price to consumer. But ultimately, if this is becoming, and it has become in many cases, the cost, it will have to get passed on. Now, this thing about whether we should import or export high value products or low value products, I think we're talking about everything is value at every price point. Every consumer buys it because at that price, the consumer, she is getting value for what she's paying. And therefore, it is extremely important to supply every single price point at which consumption transaction can take place. And, there is nothing which is economy or there is nothing which is, premium in quality. So you have to deliver the experience which the consumer desires at that price point and do that in a quality manner. Again, we're talking food. You cannot compromise with safety. You cannot compromise with taste. No food gets sold. So all of that is just a matter of serving demand. Now, we all know the bigger volumes are at mass prices. The bigger profits are at premium prices, and you need that mix as a company. So for us to be able to absorb the freight cost for 3 months or 6 months, we need this mix. We're going to take a hit on our margins. Again, most people who announce their results, we saw that. But it all has come back because then people do things to take out costs and pass on some cost.
A
Yeah,
question.
in fact,
Can I ask a
we
question,
had the, yeah, Kendall, just one comment from me. We had the results for the last quarter for Hindustan Unilever, which came in the papers today. And it talks about how the company managed, in spite of a high inflation, to protect their margin, and of course also grow at the same time at almost 10%, just a little under 10%. So yeah, I think a good well managed company would be able to do a bit of both. Manage the inflation also appropriately. Yeah, Kendall, what was it that you wanted to say?
No, my question was for Vivek because, as we experience these freight increases, anything that I've heard, read, or been communicated about has been that the freight forwarders specifically have always dealt on lean margins. And the question becomes, will we see these freight costs revert? And the feedback I've been getting is that, no, we don't think it will. It'll likely stay where it is. This becomes the new normal. So if that's the case, how do you continue to absorb the freight cost, Vivek? I mean, at some point, I guess you're going to have to pass through a price increase to the retailer.
Yes, you would, Kendall. But the freight, whatever we are hearing, it's not going to be 5 times or 7 times. Right. It's more likely next year to be in the 2.5x. Okay. So that's what you really say. That's what the cost is. And at some point in time will come in, and as you know very well, there are you've got some annual or biannual sort of contracts with the big retailers. Having said that, they were receptive to the idea that yes, this is happening. I think the bigger challenge is that even at that cost of a container, you are not being able to get the containers to move the goods. Right. And I think this whole shortage of containers, getting all of that's going to come in. So it's going to settle in at a certain level. And then, as you know, when price increase jumps like this, the cost increase jumps like this, the price increases are more gradual. So we'll catch up. Eventually, it will be passed on.
Yeah, Neil.
So the numbers that I see, America is a $28 trillion economy. I would say the world overall would be 90 to $100 trillion. The day that the world goes back to the norm, where this $10 to $15 trillion was removed from leisure, services, hospitality, weddings, parties, when that goes back away from purchasing of goods back towards the norm, that will be when the freight prices come down. We've worked with many of the shipping lines, and the word, I'm not joking, the word air fryer, appliances, garments, the purchases are unbelievable. The amount of homes being built in America, the amount of refurnishings that are happening, the day that slows down is the day that the freight prices will go back. But from my opinion, when it goes back, it's going to crash even worse than before. This is not at all sustainable. And when the world goes back to shopping, to having services and spending on lifestyle, the prices will be rock bottom. Mm-hmm. And that'll take till middle of 2023 and 24. But when that happens, though, I think most distribution companies should price in margins now that are very healthy. And when prices crash, be prepared to remove that reserve from your balance sheet to take that inventory hit when it does happen. But I think it'll be very drastic in 2020, middle of 2023 for the price reduction.
I think that's a good analysis, and yeah, it's very important to look a little further ahead in the medium term. I would say 2023-24 to be aware. Vivek, you want to say anything?
I just wanted to say, Rod, before you get to your next question, I really have to apologize, but I really
No, no, I
now need to
understand.
get to the next
So
one. But
yeah,
it's been fantastic, and really, again, learned from Kendall and Neil. Thank you so much for having me here.
no, no, thank you for joining and
Uh,
for all your contribution to the discussion. And we will have you over again very soon on another topic.
I look forward. Thank you, and bye now.
Thanks,
All right.
Vivek.
So there is somebody who has asked a question specifically for you, Neil. How does a distributor identify which brands to choose in their portfolio? Uh, I don't know if I understand the question
That's very
correctly.
correct. That's it.
Yeah.
One must be very clear on with their distributors. So yeah, our company is made up of three different aspects. We have our frozen range, we have our commodity range, which is our own brands, and then we deal with agencies. Now, when you deal with your agencies such as Nestle and ITC, Haldiram, and Pecano, everyone must be very clear. What are your conflicts of interest? What are your capabilities? And what you can service that will not compromise on sales being decreased for one brand versus the other.
All right. There is a question from Christy, but I don't think that's for either of you. She says, guys, we are planning to introduce a new niche product in the health food space from India. What are the key things we need to keep in mind as a distributor in US in terms of marketing? I know health is a big space, but want to focus on high repeats as well. So, Christy, I've read out your question. I don't know if that was so. Neil, I guess because this is she's talking about
Sure
US.
thing. Sure thing. Coming from India, it's very important that you have your FDA compliance and USDA compliance first and foremost. Ensure that you have the right legal analysis done and FDA analysis. Two, you have a very strong e-commerce sales strategy. Bringing it here, but the fastest sales growth will happen from e-commerce using a social media influencer or a smart social media plan.
My experience in dealing with US is that if you are talking about health food space, in what way do you describe the product as healthy? You have to be very careful. As you rightly said, the FDA norms have to be met to call it food which is delivering health in a certain manner. That is very tricky in USA.
It's the bare minimum.
It's the bare minimum, yeah.
Bare minimum. I mean, it's even more difficult in Canada because there are probably more barriers to entry for food from ingredients and compliancy than there is in the US. So
Yeah, please send my address. I'd love to receive samples. I'll give further feedback.
Yeah. All right, Christy. So I think I have thoroughly enjoyed this discussion, and I would really like to thank both of you, Neil and Kendall, and of course Vivek, who had to leave. Um, this is I mean, as I said right in the beginning, I mean, the distribution process is indeed one of those five key components of a marketing mix, and if you don't get it right, if you don't get even one of those components right, you can mess up your business. So it was important, and that's why we took up this subject. And of course, the last 18 months uh, situation has made us see the changes that have come about in the distribution process and in the way the supply chain is functioning, and one has to be prepared for these changes and the dynamic manner in which they will continue to change. I don't even say that they will stabilize at one stage. I think the world will force you to continue to look at your best practices in a dynamic manner. So thank you so much, Neil. Thank you so much, Kendall. It's been a wonderful morning from both of you.
Thank you.
And I thoroughly enjoyed this session. So have a nice day, and all those people who logged on for you, a good evening or a good night, depending on where you are.
Excellent. Thanks, Raj. Really appreciate the time.